It is 6 p.m. The school committee may seek to convene an open session and recess to executive session for the discussion and action regarding these items of business. It stemmed from open meeting under Rhode Island General Law 4246-4 and discussion and action, NEA recess duty operations appeal, general law, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, discussion action, NEA SK negotiations, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, discussion and action, MOU, SK School Committee, and SKESP, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to convene in executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Good evening, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mr. Bradley Scher. Here. Mr. James Restivo. Here. Ms. Calpetta.
Here.
Miss Melissa Boyd.
Here.
Kate Mastinetti.
Here.
Ms. Busso, is not with us tonight. I would just ask that you all pray for her. Keep her in your thoughts. Myself, Paula Whitford, I'm here. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance of the flag. Do we have a motion to seal the minutes in executive session?
Make a motion to seal the minutes of executive session.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. There were no votes taken in the executive session. Next on the agenda is community comments. We don't have anybody with us tonight, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report. I will pass that over to Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. I do want to point out an item on our consent agenda tonight included appointments of our winter coaches for basketball, track and field, gymnastics, swim, wrestling, and ice hockey. I just paid a visit to our gymnasium before this meeting to catch our opening game of boys basketball tonight. I just want to take an opportunity to wish all of these coaches the very best of luck going into what is a demanding season. Winter season is different from the other two. Practices and contests happen at all hours of the day. While I'm in the spring and in the fall, everything happens right after school. Winter sports take our coaches all over the state, and I just want to wish them the very best of luck. Our personal action form tonight is presented to you with some appointments, some resignations, and some retirements. And I want to point out the retirement of Ms. Martha Badigan, effective at the end of this year. Ms. Badigan has been serving as a library media specialist at Peacedale School for over 20 years. I'm sure I speak for the committee in saying that we wish her a smooth and successful final year before her retirement. You have our monthly enrollment update that shows enrollments in all of our schools, and then you also have a report that shows enrollments and withdrawals. And I'm going to take it as a good sign that we had 85 more enrollments than we had withdrawals from July 1, which was the end of the last school year, to just last week, December 6th. I'm also I'm going to speak for my partner, interim assistant superintendent Miss Meyer, who's not able to be with us tonight because she's not feeling well, and I hope that she feels better. But I'll share with you part of her report, which is next week we will begin to issue report cards in elementary schools, and that our report cards have undergone some revisions this fall, and that's thanks to teams of teachers and administrators who have been working during the professional development days to upgrade our report cards. No major changes there. The template looks the same. It's just that the revisions ensure that our report card accurately reflects grade level standards outlined in the Rhode Island core standards for math and for ELA. So we want our schools to be giving families accurate feedback on our children's progress towards these standards. So we'll be implementing those report cards as they get issued next week. Thanks to our and our elementary teachers and our district staff for their contributions in that effort. It was a team effort, to be sure. I will also point out that when we meet in January, one of our pieces of business will be to consider proposals that have been submitted by groups to conduct our equity audit, and that the period for submissions closed this week, and we've got a fair number of companies that have expressed an interest, and so we'll begin to discuss our process for how we want to open those, how we want to score them, and how we want to make that decision so that we can get underway with our equity audit in a complete and fair way. That concludes my superintendent's report.
I make a motion that we accept the superintendent report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda in school committee business is a discussion and action relay for life fundraisers. Raiser for the SK High School boys and girls basketball team.
I'll make a motion to approve the Relay for Life fundraiser for the Southington High School boys and girls basketball as posted on board docs.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is speed cameras in the school zone.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until our next meeting, as the person who's supposed to present is not able to come tonight.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a discussion and action on a student's transportation policy. I will pass that over to Ms. Boyd.
All right, and she's gonna pass it over to me.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so student transportation is a policy we took a look at as part of the transportation subcommittee, and then also passed through the policy subcommittee. And we made some revisions to the original policy, which thought I included, but it should be up on the on board docs if you want to pull it up and see what the changes are. But essentially just clarifying pieces, being a little more clear about the walking distance, and then there's a piece about use of private cars, which was held in there for some reason. And through our discussions with administration, we learned there's no teachers are ever transporting students with private cars anyway. So we felt it wasn't a necessary piece of it. We ran it by legal and they agreed that it was okay to take this out of the policy. And just a few other revisions of that nature. So feel free to read through and let me know if you have any comments or feedback on this, so we can take it back for further revisions if needed.
There is a discussion and action on the FY 24-25 budget preparation. I would assume that would be finance to us. Come on it.
evening is our draft presentation for the joint town council school committee meeting, budget kickoff on December 20th. So basically I took the format from last year and tried to provide you with some updated figures here. So I'd just like to walk you through the presentation, solicit your feedback, try to answer your questions to the best of my ability, essentially. So with that, we'll just proceed to the first slide. So the first two slides essentially are just reference to the Rhode Island general law, outlining the town and school committee responsibilities at this budget consultation meeting. The town will provide projected revenues for the next fiscal year. The school committee will essentially provide expected expenditures, enrollments, things of that nature. I have a feeling you've seen this before, so I don't need to elaborate too much, unless you have a question. Yeah, perfect. All right, so we'll move now to enrollment and staffing. So essentially here we have a snapshot of our enrollment going back to 2017 and 18 through current. You'll see the long-term trend there is roughly a decline of about 18% since 2017, 2018. And then at the bottom there, that's just a carry forward from last year. Essentially, I think that was the way the schools used to be constituted. Since we closed Curtis Corner Middle, obviously that's a little bit different. But basically, the big takeaway here is just the overall long-term trend of decline in enrollment.
Do you intend to update that with the current configuration of the schools, or is it gonna leave it as is?
I can update that absolutely, because that probably makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have the comparison across the years just
Sure.
to see how it is. Maybe having both would be good.
Sure, just to preserve the history.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. Very good. Moving to the next slide, slide 6. Enrollment and payments
Can
to,
I interrupt you?
Oh,
And that
sure,
if
go.
that seems to be shrinking on you, if you want to join us at the table, so you don't have to worry about balancing.
oh, that's okay. No worries.
I just keep watching it go down.
Yeah, no, it's all part of the performance. All good. Thank you. I appreciate that. So looking at enrollments and payments to schools outside the district, essentially, or CTE schools and state and charter schools. So you can see essentially the long-term trend for career and tech is peaking here at about 103 students for career and tech programs. State enrollment is in those two schools, they're essentially level. And then charter enrollment is at essentially what is an all-time high, which drives the grand total there at the bottom. And that's, I mean, the key takeaway here is just the number of students that we're sending out of district at our local share, which is a new concept to me, for sure. But essentially, that's the big takeaway there. So, any questions, concerns? Okay, very good. Moving to slide 7, this is current staffing. So you have the history preserved again, going back to 2017, and then you just have your different position categories there essentially. So you look at that total for this fiscal year, we're at about 401 FTEs, almost 402 roughly. That represents about a 17% decrease from the peak of 2018, 2019. And the majority of the decrease there is in instructional staff. We move to the next slide, you'll see a comparison between our total current FTEs and our vacancies. So essentially we have 7 vacancies across the district. So just a note, in the original version that we posted online, I had some typos on this slide, so that's why we revised it. So apologies for that confusion. Essentially we have 7 vacancies across the district. So our total organization structure, if we had hired all of the FTEs, is about 408.7 FTEs. So the district admin open position is the assistant superintendent. School-based admin is assistant principal at South Kingstown High School. The instructional support is 3 TAs, teachers assistants. Facilities and maintenance, that's a custodial position. And then the clerical is an admin specialist. Questions or comments here? Okay, perfect. So we'll move to the next discussion here, which is revenues and expenditures. And if we're looking at slide 10, this is the history of our state education, broken out by formula aid, group home aid, high cost, special education. And then on the right here, essentially these are the factors that went into the formula aid. You'll see the 499 is highlighted there because if I have interpreted the documents correctly, they changed what that factor is. They don't call it the FRPL anymore. They call it something different. I had it written down, but I lost it. That number is preliminary. I just want to point that out essentially. But you can see that from the bottom there in 2020, 2021, we've had roughly a steady increase of state aid. Obviously, that's never guaranteed. There's a lot of mystery there. We won't know the proposed budget from the governor's office until at least January. Makes it a little bit difficult to plan and finalize. Questions there? Very good. Proceeding to slide 11. This is the history of our actual and budgeted total revenue. And I just want to say at the outset, the actual figures there for 2022 and 23 are pending the final audit, which is close to completion. So that is subject to change for sure. And then you can see our budgeted amounts there for 2023 and 2024. Any anomalies or questions or concerns here? Very good. Proceeding to the next slide, slide 12. These are actual budgeted and total expenditures, preserving the history again back to 2017. So the primary decrease there between 2021 and 2022 and 23 was from salaries and benefits. As you saw on the previous slide about FTEs, the primary decrease in instructional staff accounts for that there. You'll see the relative decrease in benefits as well. There was an increase in professional and tech and other purchase services, and supplies and materials are kind of leveling off, staying within a relevant range there. You'll notice our property and CapEx expenditures are trending upward. That's just driven by the capital needs. Our maintenance director working with the building committee as well, understanding the things that we need for our long-term plan. Questions or concerns? Sure.
I'm just curious, which category is our tuition to other schools?
Other schools.
Would it be professional and technical,
Yeah, that's a
other
great
purchase
question.
services?
That's a really good question.
I guess it'll be purchase services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. Purchase services.
Okay, and transportation would be in that same category?
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to understand because I
Sure.
think those two things really drive that
Yeah,
category.
that's a great point. And I do have a slide at the end here, essentially with the budget drivers. That is on there. So that's a great point. Thank you. Which is the next slide, actually. Okay, slide 13. So primary budget drivers here. Some of these things are carryovers from previous year as well, and relatively obvious, but essentially the ESSER funds, that's the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Those are sunsetting next year, next calendar year. So we have to figure out if we'll absorb, the expenditures in that fund, or if we'll have to eliminate them. Salaries and benefits, obviously, we have contract negotiations with our unions, transportation costs, as you just alluded to. Our maintenance of effort, obviously, if the town decides to level fund again, things of that nature. Potentially decreasing state aid. We'll see how the funding formula shakes out as well. And then, as we alluded to in a prior slide, the increase in out-of-district kids, the transportation costs and the tuition costs associated with that. Those are some of the big drivers there. And anything, you want to add?
Actually, I just have a question.
Sure.
The first one, the ESSER 3 positions. I know we have some that we have memorandum of agreement that they're only 1-year position, but in these ESSER positions, do you know how many are permanent that either we have to make a hard decision on if we're going to keep these permanent positions and find money in the general fund, or if we have to eliminate positions? I think I just like at this point to know how many positions we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get that to you.
I think I can. I think I can add, I think we have 11 right now. I think we have 11 positions that where the funding source is ESSER money. So as we go forward, and this funding source dries up, that we're facing some difficult decisions about whether or not these folks are providing essential services to us. And if they are, then they'll have to be paid for with our operating budget.
Thank you so much. I frankly didn't realize the number was so high. But thank you. I'm glad to have the information.
Sure. So just to provide some extra detail, this is the current FTE spreadsheet from our HR department. We have 2 working in student services, 8 instructional staff, and 1 instructional support. So that's the total of 11. Last slide. I did not get to mandated changes or changes in school operations and things of that nature. Obviously, I can include that as I coordinate with our superintendent, assistant superintendent. But essentially what I'm looking for from you is just some feedback to revise this as necessary. Otherwise, this is essentially what I'll present to the town council next morning.
I mean, typically, the initial kickoff meeting which is, I think annually, so this year it's on the 20th, and I believe it's like that Wednesday, it's the same week, same Wednesday every year. And it is typically just what you presented. Questions are asked, but it's more a matter of kind of what we'd like to see going forward as we continue through budget season, because we'll have many meetings, right? So to me, this is a great overview. Some good questions that Carol asked is to have some information around, I mean, really that ESSER 3, like the discrepancy between, you know, what we're getting from the town, and then including the ESSER funds and the grants. And the discrepancy, once those things, if some of those things go away, what does that mean for our school districts, since the town is not making any noises to give us any more than 0%. So it really going forward, it's being able to answer those kind of questions, and maybe not necessarily on the 20th, but start preparing those kind of, because those are the kind of questions that I would have, like, so if really where it's, even though yes, we're at 68 million, some of those funds are ESSER funds, some of those funds are going to go away. And so how are we going to make up the difference? And if we can't, then what does that look like? And things of those kind of questions we'll need to navigate going forward, especially considering, I don't see us getting much more, financially from the town than what we've been getting for the past 3-4 years. So.
Should be realistic.
I think the other question I would anticipate from the town is about our fund balance. And I know the audit isn't complete for last year, but I think that question is going to be asked. And what a justification for the amount that's going to be kept in there.
Just want to piggyback on what Brad said, because we put one number out there for fund balance, but a lot of it's restricted. And I think if you could add a slide on what the fund balance is, with the analysis of what's restricted and what is restricted by Title I, or, you know, the funds that are restricted, because our fund balance can't be used for just anything. And then we really need, my opinion, our best practices of keeping 2%, 2 to 3% in fund balance as a cushion really shouldn't include the restricted funds. You know, so I think by having it broken out, we might have a better discussion, because we could see the true numbers.
Sure.
So that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And although that is a requirement of the financial statements, so when we do have the final draft, you will see it there, but I'll get it before then as well.
And another thing that people are it's probably gonna be asked of, maybe not on the 20th, but certainly throughout this budget process, is how we addressing the maintenance needs of the elementary schools and the middle school that are not included in the high school bond. So how does the CapEx cover those? What are those maintenance needs covering? Are we adequately covering the maintenance needs with that? I know those questions are coming up. I actually have that question. Myself. And the other thing I want to point out on the vacancies, just making it clear, like the 408.7 that you have in here, that's the budgeted number of positions, right? On the staffing vacancy slide.
Vacancy slide. Correct,
Okay,
Correct,
and then the
yep.
401.7 is the actual fill position.
correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's great, great point.
Right, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and action of selection of a superintendent search firm. I'll turn that over to Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think our process for looking at our proposals was we asked the submittals to come in two separate envelopes. We asked whoever was going to bid to help us with this process would first submit their plan. What it is that your plan would look like, what services would you provide to us, what would your timeline be, et cetera. And then in a separate envelope, submit your budget. And we distributed to you the plans from two concerns, and you had those for a week. One came from McPherson and Jacobson, Executive Recruitment and Development from Omaha, Nebraska. And the other came from the New England School Development Council in Marlborough, Massachusetts. After a week looking that over, everyone got a copy of their proposed budgets. And so those have been submitted to you. There's if you look at the proposals, the New England School Development Council, commonly referred to as NESDEC, came in with a proposed fee of $11,600 and expenses $2,160, with a total cost of $13,760. And McPherson and Jacobson came in with a similar fee of $11,000 with expected expenses at $6,700 for a total of $17,700. Each presented their plan. You can see that there's a lot of similarities there. So I would leave it up to the committee to make a decision on if you wish to contract with either of these concerns to help us with the search for a permanent superintendent for South Kingstown Schools.
Do we have a excuse me, do we have a motion to move towards vote? We want to have a discussion. We have to make a motion first
So,
to do.
just a procedural. Do you want a motion to accept one of them? Is that what we need to make a motion on? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I think we should have a discussion on it before we make any motions on anything.
Typically, yes, there's a motion on the floor and then that motion is discussed. So if you read Robert's rules and you buy the book, then yeah, there's a motion on the floor, whichever one. And then, you know, if the committee ultimately does not agree with the firm that's selected, then that motion would get voted down and a new motion would be made for whatever, you know, whether to go forward with a different firm or however, but typically, yes.
Okay, I knew you were gonna say that, but it's not what I wanted to hear. All right, I make a motion to accept the NESDEC proposal.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I actually thought the McPherson presentation was better, and I liked the fact that they didn't have all the costs were up front. NASDAQ had some other items, add-on items that were not quoted or quote upon request, so we don't know what the true cost would be. I felt with McPherson, our true cost was more readily apparent. I think both firms have the similar process, similar procedure. I looked up some of the placements that both firms have done, and all have been pretty successful. So I think from a qualitative perspective, they're pretty similar. I just preferred the fact that McPherson outlined all the expenditures up front, whereas NESDEC had some that were not quite transparent.
So when I looked at the add-ons and things, I thought they pretty much came in at the same dollar amount because there's just more flexibility on what you want to add on with NESDEC. So it didn't come down to cost for me, which is odd for me, but I just didn't like that the Nebraska firm didn't have any consultants in Rhode Island or Massachusetts. They had never done a search in Rhode Island or Massachusetts. The closest was Connecticut. NESDEC is here. The principal, one of them is right from EG. I was going to ask Alexis if she knew that person, but I think Rhode Island is unique. I think that we need somebody that knows Rhode Island, that has worked with within RIDE and Rhode Island systems. And so that's what really pushed me in the direction of NESDEC.
A factor. They're very close together. So I don't think that should drive us either way. And their process is fairly similar. The difference maker for me, and having worked with some recruiters, is I think ultimately we're likely to attract somebody from New England, and it can often make a difference if the person being recruited knows the recruiter, and it's pretty likely that they're going to at least know of NASDAQ if you work in New England, and that there might be more of that there'll be more personal knowledge, I think, with NASDAQ, knowing who the potential candidates are and possibly reaching out to individuals who they think are a good fit. Because, I mean, as was said, the other group has never done recruitment either in Rhode Island or Massachusetts, which are probably our biggest pools of candidates.
So there was part of me that I almost wanted to lean towards a group from out of state, just so that they could come in and look at it like completely objectively. But at the same time, I lean towards Brad, as you were saying, like there is a distinct knowledge base of educating students and communicating with people from our region. And it would be nice to attract folks from outside of our typical pool. But I think NASDAQ is surely capable of handling that as well. So I have a tendency to lean towards NASDAQ at the end of the day, but I did go back and forth a little bit there. Last night. And we'll be kind of pushing that application out. So to any community member out there who is interested in having a say in who we select as our next architect and engineer going forward for our next phase through the bond vote, please keep an eye out for that. And it will be a form that people can submit. There's not necessarily any requirements for it, but it will ask your level of interest, experience. But we're open to anybody who wants to commit to helping us pick our next engineer and our architect and engineer team. The only commitment would be time, and I believe we were looking at it probably take up about 8 hours total, not necessarily in one day. So that application goes out to the community. It will be released. Actually, it's gone out today. They're due by December 29th. So if you're interested, make sure you fill that application out by December 29th. If you haven't seen it and you are interested, please communicate with one of us so that we can get it to you. By January 4th, the school building committee will be selecting the team that is going to go through the selection and interview process of the interested architect and engineers. And by June 12th, we're hoping to close the bid process for the architects and engineers. And then basically go from there, shortlisting folks and selecting them to be interviewed. And so we're moving pretty quick. So, and Bob, please, if I'm forgetting anything, jump in. So, the makeup of that selection team, we came to the school building committee came to the consensus that they wanted Superintendent Littlefield to be part of that selection committee. Our building director, facilities maintenance director, Brian Mahoney, Dave Palizzetti, who is on our school building committee because he has experience at URI in projects of this magnitude. They initially would express interest to have Luke Murray as our deputy town manager. However, he actually just expressed that he cannot take part. And so the second in line was Dr. McGarr, our principal from the high school. We also requested that the town council appoint one town councilor and then adding to it the 2 community members. So it'll be a total of 7 people on that team. As far as the status of the architect and engineer RFQ, it has been put out. It was released on December 8th. It will close January 12th. It has been released out on BidNet, is published in our local newspapers, and then our left field, our OPM is doing their job, pushing it out to firms that they are familiar with. I already heard from Chris Spiegel with Left Field that this particular project is on the radar of some of the top groups out there. We have a lot of interest. We are the first community to put out the bid. And so hopefully we can get a kind of the strategy that we're banking on prior to the bond. Hopefully we can get the biggest bang for the buck. I think I nailed everything. And then of course, update on the bond vote. The date, it's looking like we are going to be kind of locked into May 7th as the actual bond vote. Still having some discussions with our legislators and the town council and our clerks, but due to various timing issues, requirements, deadlines, things of that nature, odds are it will most likely, we're going to plan for May 7th. And I think the only other thing that was discussed was polling places. Ideally, we won't have to utilize our schools, but also ideally, we won't only have a single polling place with lines around the building. So hopefully the town manager and our and the school department can come to a consensus of maybe utilizing some of our empty buildings and or other areas besides just the rec center.
End of our meeting tonight. However, we didn't have any people in the audience when we started out and came to community comments. So I would like to open up the floor for community comments. If there's anybody interested in coming up to the podium and making a comment. Come on up.
Wonderful. The Relay for Life. So thank you for organizing that. That's wonderful.
The kids are really excited about it, so I can't wait to tell them. Thank you.
Calendars, and the meeting wasn't on either calendar. It wasn't on the town council's calendar, and it wasn't on your calendar. So if you want people to show up at If it's not on there, you probably should get it there. Um, I've said this, before, and it has to do with, so you have a budget that you're gonna be talking about. And you have a high school you want to build. But right now, building the high school is all gonna go directly on to the taxpayers without any any thought of the school department from trying to help the situation by lowering costs. Now, you have a surplus from this year. And this is the year that so we've been doing this maintenance of effort thing. So we have these two different phrases, maintenance of effort and level funding. So maintenance of effort, some people think it means that whatever you gave last year, you're going to give this year and you're going to give next year at least. And that's basically what you guys have been doing for the last 4 years. But all that's done is increase our per pupil cost every year significantly. Now, when I brought up comparing ourselves to East Greenwich, people don't like that. Well, try this one. Try Smithfield this year. 5 schools, 2,402 students. But it's about as close as you can get, right? Their total budget this year is $43 million. Now, let me just make sure I'm correct in that. You got it right here. Their total budget for this year is $43 million. Now I'm not talking about ESSER funds. I'm not talking about any federal stuff other than the normal year-to-year federal stuff we get from Title I and that stuff. I'm not talking about the big dollars, big ESSER fund dollars. I'm just talking about general funding between us and so for this year, general funding for us is 62.6 million. Here's 43 million. Now, come on, folks. Same amount of students, same number of schools. How can one district do it for $20 million less? Or the better question is, why does it cost us $20 million more? Okay, so you have some factors here. Number one, transportation. We have 5 million in transportation. They have half of that, 2.5. But the big ticket items are out of district tuition and compensation. They're only paying like $500,000 a year for out of district tuition. We're at 4.5 million. Now we've talked about this a lot. We're not going to get the kids that go to Compass and the kids that go to Kingston Hill Academy. They're not coming back here. Okay, we can just forget that. The students we have to target, and we're hopefully as time goes on that some of them will come back, and hope maybe a ton of them will come back, and maybe some kids from other districts will come back, is when this new high school opens up. We're looking at that's sort of like 5 years down the line. So the only place you can actually make a difference in your budget is in compensation. Now, when I look at the compensation numbers for Smithfield, they're like $103,000 per FTE this year. East Greenwich is like $99,000, $100,000 per FTE. We're at $121,000 per FTE. That's a huge amount of difference. So that's big, that's $8 million. It boils down to $8 million. So we're paying a lot of people a lot of money. I've asked you before to consider an early retirement incentive. I've been told by other, not this specific school committee, but a prior school committee group, that it's too expensive. We can't do that. So in other words, we can't, which didn't make any sense. You have these high, we have, so one of the biggest reasons why we have this biggest differential in the amount of money we spend per FTE is in our compensation for our teachers, because over the last 20 years, this district has said we'd like to hire experienced and a lot of times top step 10 teachers. But now we have this huge, remember that graph I gave you last year? Look, it's like this giant bar at the top, step 10, and it's held, it's balancing on like a stick of all the other steps. We have to get cheaper. The only way to get cheaper is to get younger. Now, so when I hear you talking about these 11 positions that are being paid for by ESSER funds and how we're going to keep them next year, it makes my head hurt, because we have a ratio of 5.8 students per FTE when just before the dual language program came online in 2014-15, our ratio was 6.67 students per FTE. If we had that same ratio today, we'd only have like 350, 340 people working here. So the two issues you have a lot of people and they're making a lot of money. And what I fear is that if you go into these negotiations and say, we're just going to keep on doing it, give us the 56 million and we'll just happy. I believe it's an unsustainable thing. And this year, if you have that money where you could fund your schools for 1 year on a per pupil basis, it would cover 60% of the cost of that new school by lowering the tax rate for everybody in this town, and you'd get the bond would pass without any question. I got one other thing for you. When you're talking about the new superintendent, I hope you're going to talk about the $200,000 starting salary at the minimum. And don't worry about the town, the town manager, when he signed his new contract, whatever you pay the superintendent, he automatically gets a raise. Anyway, I guess that's it. Thank you for listening to me.
Good, John.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passed.